Open D tuning. Exactly the same configuration as open E, just down a whole step. So that got me thinking, is this now a B flat instrument? We'll talk about that in a second. Let's start off with some chords. Be free. I'm fully aware I'm a free man. But I absolutely love this song. There's a lot to learn from it, and we'll get into that in a second. But first, open D tuning. So, like I said, it's the same as open E, talking intervals between these two strings. The fifth and sixth string, it's fifth, then fourth, then a major third, then a minor third, then a fourth. So it's just like playing an open E chord in standard tuning, though down 2 frets. So you could think of it like the reverse capo. And to get onto that topic that I mentioned, this is now a B flat instrument. So I was thinking about this morning before I started this video. When you play a C on a piano, it's C concert pitch. When you play a C on an alto saxophone, it's actually an E flat in concert pitch. And a tenor saxophone, if you play a C on a tenor saxophone, it's B flat concert pitch. Forgive me if I've mixed those concert pitches up, the transpositions up, but the idea remains the same. If you're like me and you've spent a lot of time learning the notes of the fretboard in standard tuning or open E tuning, it can sometimes get confusing to think of the concert pitch notes on a guitar that is detuned. So if I was to play a C on in open E, it would be here on the first fret of the fifth string, or there's multiple places to play it. But just for example, though in this open D said scenario, I still see that as a C note, though it actually sounds as B flat. Hence my thinking why this is now a B flat instrument. And why does this matter? So I also play in open C, open D, sometimes in betweens, the open E flats and whatever it might be. But I always still have the reference of open E. So like I see the guitar's chord names as I would in open E. So it can sometimes get confusing when teaching lower tunings. And imagine if you were aware of this transposition idea, I could explain any of the chords as the same name, but with that awareness of the transposition, you would be able to come to the same conclusion of where the chord is being played. And also, if a musical director puts sheet music in front of you and he's aware that you're playing a detuned instrument, a down-tuned instrument, he could make that partition, or the whatever you want to call it, written for a B flat instrument, just like he would if he was giving a tenor saxophonist some sheet music to play in the band, and you could read that sheet music if it was transposed for a B flat instrument and play the guitar as though it was tuned to open E without having to transpose any of the chords in your head. That being said, what does it really matter? Because the good saxophone players out there, they can read both concert pitch and their transposed pitch. But to me, it would make sense if in the future this idea became less of an idea and more of a concept. So I could explain the same things between all the different open tunings that I plan to be giving lessons on, I guess. Yeah. So that brings me to why I'm going to explain the chords of this song in the Nashville numbering system. So that's using the numbers related to the chords, a chord progression. So you might have heard 1-4-5 or a chord progression 2-5-1. So that's all. I believe that's the name for it, Nashville numbering system. But it's just putting a number to each of the chords in the progression, and that way it's easier to understand and transpose if needed as well. So this song, I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. Originally written by Billy Taylor as an instrumental. Sorry if I got that name wrong. I got to know this song through Nina Simone, which is when lyrics were put to the song, and I believe she popularized this song, and it's been covered by a bunch of other artists since. And I'm not playing it in her original key or anything like that either. I'm just playing it in a key that I want to right now, and I'm playing it in a key that's not of this guitar. So this guitar is an open D. I'm not playing this in the key of D. I'm actually playing it in the key of A, and so A concert pitch. So that's our one chord. One.
Live now playing on Apple Music.
Okay, Siri, that's not the time. Sorry about that. Siri's listening in at all times. So, coming back, so the one chord here. The first 4 bars of the progression are basically, and I say basically, they're going 1-4-4-1. And then there's a lot of cool things happening to create interest within the progression. So starting on the 1 chord, to get us to the 4 chord in that second bar, beforehand we're going to the 3 chord dominant 7. And it's a nice progression. You'll hear this in many different songs. In this case, we're creating a bit of a different movement and turning this chord into an inversion and creating some melodic movement in the chord as well. So we have the major triad here on top, 1, 3, 5, flat 7. So I'm going to move that third to the bass, and I'm going to move that root up to the second string as a top note. So there we have an open voice triad. Open voice triad just being a triad that is greater than 1 octave. Closed voice is one that is within an octave. So this open voice triad is now 3, 5, root. And this is the 3 chord in the progression. And to create some melodic movement, we drop that root down to the flat 7. And now we're moving to the 4 chord, which we're sort of going to, I don't want to say cascade. What's the opposite of cascade? Going up. So after this 3 chord, my first and second finger are just going to move up 1 fret. And I'm going to hit the open E string at the top to sort of complete the chord. Now that open E is going to act like a glue, because essentially here we're on the 4 chord, we're just playing an inversion. It's 3, 5, 1. And we're on the 4 chord for 2 bars, but we're going to create some movement within this as well. We move down to sort of a 2 minor of the 4 chord. You could also see it as the 4 with a sus note, but the bass is on the would be on the 2 minor of the 4. But yeah, it's creating movement within the 4 chord. Then down to the I was about to say E, but concert pitch D, which is the 4 chord. And now I have lost my train of thought a little bit, so let me just play this song. Okay, so after the 4 chord, we got to get back to that 1 on. We got to get back to that 1 chord, and we're going to keep this 4 chord, but put a 5 in the bass. So it creates a 5 chord, like the 5, dominant 9, sus4. Then we resolve back to 1. And I do a little 4-1 progression here. So you hear that a lot in blues and gospel music. Is play when you're on the 1 chord, it can play around with the 4 and 1 like da. Anyway, it's a trust me, it gets played a lot 4-1 while you're on the 1 chord. So that's the first 4 bars. Now the next 4 bars are 1 to 5. With, again, creating some interest and movement. And also, a lot of this correlates back to the melody as well, but I'll play through that at the end. So this 1 chord, we're going to do that 4-1 movement again, just to create some movement. And I'm going to stop you there. This might be a good time to look at triads. So triads, because a lot of this is just based on triads and their inversions. So looking at, in this key, the root chord, getting to know your triads along each string set, a string set being the number of strings in the chord. How would I describe this? So a triad is 3 notes, so there's 3 strings involved. So that would mean, if we look at 3 strings at a time, there's 4 different string sets. Easy enough. So triad here, root 3, 5. Now it's a good idea to always be aware of the degrees you're playing. That way you can manipulate the chord. You can use the chord in a lot more situations if you're aware of the degrees that I'm talking. I think this is already obvious with the way that I've been teaching so far. But getting to know your triads up and down the neck, along the strings, on each of the string sets. And I have to admit, on this very last string set, between the lowest 3 strings, aren't practical as closed voice triads. For an example, there's the root, there's the 3, and there's the 5. Even if I wasn't wearing a slide on that pinky, I wouldn't be able to play that. So, but I'm aware of it, and you should be aware of these things, I think. You get what I mean? So just being aware of the triads along each string set, and then also, just importantly, being aware of the triads across the fretboard, and at the same time being aware of what are the degrees. So right there I have the 5th on top, there I have the 3rd on top, the root on top, and then that impossible voicing that I'm not going to play. So being aware of all these voicings across the fretboard and along the fretboard, and then eventually you'll start to see them as well diagonally, and you can start to use them as more of a soloing tool and mapping out the neck. But for now, that was a little bit of a tangent. Just to, each time we come across triads, a new triad, or just, this is based off 1, 4, and 5, this song, right? So you've got 3 triads to really try and get to know, and get to know them. Getting to know them will give you more options for these, or just easier, more facility. Okay, let's go through all these synonyms. More facility with knowing your inversions and seeing the chords on the neck. So now back to the song. We're in the second little section of the song, which is 1, 5, 1. So 1, do a little bit of movement on that 1 chord. And I'm going to head to the 5 a little bit early, just because it sort of fits with the melody. Now we're landing on the 5 there. And again, I'm doing this 4 of 5, which is actually the 1 chord, which is just like what I showed you before. Again, creates movement, and it sort of follows the melody as well. And now we're staying on this 5 chord for these 2 bars. I'm going to do 5 of 5. So you can think of it as a 2-5-1, but in my head, we're staying on the 5, so it sort of becomes 5 of 5 just to create a bit of movement. Or, you get what I mean? So 5 all of a sudden feels like home. And then I play that flat 7, which I'm using as an open string. It's a nice little advantage of knowing your open strings. So now you're like, okay, we're moving back. This is getting us back to the 1. I believe I skipped out on a couple of just letting you know the degrees, but if you slow it down and have a look at where my fingers were, you'll be able to figure it out. Also, the tabs will be on my Patreon page. So this chord leads us back to the 1. And now the next section is the same as the first 4 bars, though I'll show you some different voicings. Just gonna make sure that Siri doesn't start up again. So yeah, back to this famous voicing of the open tuning, barring that 1 fret. And we'll take it an easier route for this next 4 bars. We're just going to go up to that the third chord, as in the 3rd degree, the chord built off the 3rd degree, and bar that one. Now we're going to create that same melodic movement we did on the first time through. So here we have the top note on the top string going down to the flat 7 here. So now that leads us again to the 4 chord. And here we're on the 12th fret, so sometimes I might play it as a harmonic. Look, Ma, I'm a piano player, no hands. You know, they got the pedal. Stupid joke. So we're on that 4 chord, and again, we're going to go to the 2 minor of 4. This time I'm playing it as a direct minor 7 chord. So we have, if I think of it as the minor 7 chord, we have the root, then we have the 5, flat 7, flat 3, and then we're back to the 4. Then we got to turn this into that same 5 dominant 9 sus 4, or you could think of it as the 4 chord on the 5. And that leads us back home to the root. Now this last little part, this last section of the song has a nice turnaround, and I absolutely love this progression. We have the sharp 4 diminished. You can play it down here as well. But up here, because I'm wearing a slide, I choose up here because some of these other voicings coming up are a bit more difficult down there. So we have the diminished, and the nature of diminished is... Okay, we're not getting into diminished theory right now. We'll just call it what it is. Sharp 4 diminished, then we're going up to the root chord, but on the 5th. So the 5th is in the bass. Because the bass line... So, we're on the root chord with the 5th in the bass. Now we're going to the 3 chord with the 3rd in the 3rd in the bass, or the sharp 5 from the home key. I really hope this is not too confusing for you, but this is how the Nashville numbering system works in my head, and this is how I think of it. So maybe I'm just giving you insight into my mind. And what I like to do here, because if I wasn't wearing a slide, I could play this voicing across like that. It's just a straight up major triad, though that 3rd is doubled. So what I like to do is sort of switch between the two sometimes. And And so then after this chord, we move up to the minor 6 chord. And you can do that same thing. Or you could just play it like that. And then back down to that diminished. Then back to the root. And at the end of the very end of this song, they use that as a tag, so it repeats this progression. And it's a fun one to solo over. But for now, after we get to the second time to that diminished chord, we go back to the root, and then we do the 5 chord, but we're playing it as 5/9 sus4. Again, we looked at this voicing in the previous video, Isn't She Lovely? Which gets us back to 1. And then to get us back to because now we're on 1 before the end of the form, we sort of just want to create that continue that movement. So we go back to that 5 chord to get us back into the start of the song. So, I know I use a lot of terminology, probably a lot of jargon there, so don't hesitate if you have any questions or if there's anything you'd like me to clarify. So, like I said, I'll put the tabs chord chart up on my Patreon page. Head over there if you'd like to check it out. It also helps me out greatly for those who have signed up, and I appreciate everyone who has signed up already. Let me just check my notes. I believe I rambled on enough. I hope I haven't confused anyone too much. So let's just jam it out a little bit. Like I said, I'll play a bit of that melody.